Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raad Life. Today, we are in, depending on when you started and what part of the world you're either in week 2 or you're in week 3. But the point is that we are now experiencing and have been told that we have now an extension, because regardless of when you started, April 1st, which is today, was going to be, let me do this again. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raad Life. So depending on where you are in the world, this week is either your second week or third week of this coronavirus crisis that we're all involved in globally. And if you are like me, you were under a certain impression until we hit this first week of April. Because we were told that we were only going to need to sequester and stay indoors and shelter, if you will, physical distance for a certain duration of time. And universally, that has now been extended. And I think what I'm hearing from people, and it's totally understandable, is that they are now facing a new reality. The first couple of weeks, they were hunkering down. It was a manageable thing. We get caught up on our honey-do lists. We do some gardening that we didn't get the chance to after we hoard all the toilet paper, paper towels, that we can get. We've stocked the food like we haven't done in a long time. And now we basically just wait this thing out. It's a short duration of time. We are going to be okay. And then we now extend it for at least another 30 days. And from my perspective, I believe it'll be longer officially, and then even after we are through this officially as a crisis, there's going to be the psychological impact of how long does it take for us to really get out of it and trust that we are safe. And then right in time probably for another flu season and the beginning of next year. So with that being said, I wanted to bring somebody on that could talk about this from different perspectives. And the gentleman I'm going to be bringing on is Jon Warner. And Jon, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jon on the Raad Life last year for his book that he published. So I'm going to bring Jon on, and we're going to see what his take is on this. Jon, are you there?
I am here.
Good morning, my friend. How are you?
I am very well. How are you?
I'm good. I like the batik above your head.
Indeed. Well, we all have to do new things in these coronavirus days. I'm in the guest bedroom of my house.
Well, thank you for sharing your guest bedroom with us this morning. I was going to say, I think your office environment is a lot more relaxed than mine. I think I have more of a formal organizational structure maybe over here. But I was saying before I brought you on, Jon, that you and I had the pleasure of having you on the show before, and you had written a book, and that, I kind of set the stage for us here, where a lot of people, have been through this, depending on what part of the world they're in. This is their second week, the third week. But the point is that we were under this impression, universally, that, hunker down for a bit. It's a minor inconvenience. Yes, you got to stock up on toilet paper and paper towels and hoard food like you haven't done since the last time you had family over, maybe. But you're going to be okay. And it's a minor pain. It's unusual pain. You got a social distance, which in some cases, I don't have to interact with people as often. But now we've all universally been told that we have at least another 30 days and possibly more, could be 8 weeks. And I was saying that, in my opinion, it's going to be more than 30 days. And then there's a psychological impact, which after we are given the all clear, how long does it take us after that to get back into a rhythm? And I don't want to use the word back to normal, because I don't think we are going to go back to normal. I don't think there's a coming back to where we were for a number of reasons. I think we were kind of on the threshold of a possible recession. We were probably running very fat for a while. So there were some corrective behavior patterns that were showing already, but this was jarring for everybody. And now it's even more extremely jarring because it's been extended.
Hmm.
So I said that one person I can think of that would probably be able to lend insight into this and have the ability to look at it from sort of the investors out there position, the senior side of things, because we also have that population that barely recovered from 2008 and their 401k is taking a hit, and now boom, here we are again. So would you take a minute and maybe just share a little background with people who did not have the pleasure of listening to you last time you were on the show? And then let's just dive right into it.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, just a little on background. I have a very unusual background. I did philosophy as my undergrad, and kind of
No wonder
stayed.
I like you.
So, I guess I have a philosophical bent that I've retained all through my career. And then I've had a number of different sort of career changes, in terms of things that I've done. Educationally, I ended up doing a PhD in psychology. So I guess I come at a lot of things through a psychological lens. How do people think about this? I'm very interested in the cognitive context
Yeah.
of what goes on. My work is broadly in the healthcare space, and then within that space, I work heavily in the older adult population. And what I'm most interested in is entrepreneurship, because I think that's the driver of radical change. And with that background, I can't agree more. We've been sideswiped by something we couldn't see coming, at all levels, not just in the communities that I'm interested in. And it's hit government, it's hit people in all sorts of ways. And I think this, it's been disruptive to life in a way we've never seen before. Perhaps there are some people back in the world wars that remember something not too dissimilar to this, but something as disruptive as this is just incredible. And I'm experiencing it not just personally, but in terms of the communities we serve, not the least of which is in the senior world. We
Yeah.
closed the senior centers that I'm associated with very quickly in this crisis. But of course, that left a legacy of all sorts of things that we just couldn't do. Meals being one, food security suddenly became massively important because we were serving congregate meals.
Right.
How do you deliver 1,000 meals a day, to people's homes when you were just dragging them all into one place to do it previously?
Right.
So it's just an incredible change.
Well, and to that point, I mean, I'm on the board of an organization called Project Independence that actually provides work opportunities for people with special needs and mental challenges. And part of our clients, we refer to them as clients. Part of our clients were actually acting in a support capacity for like Meals on Wheels, for example.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and those people now are not only basically unable to provide the support for a very, very needed service for people who are shuttered. I guess they were staying in place way before that became popular, right? The old seniors, and
Absolutely.
almost to the point of isolation, but also their own livelihood, their own job security, their own sense of purpose has now gone out the window.
Absolutely.
um, at daycare centers. Thank you for bringing that up because I plan to have people from, I think, AgeWell, which is an organization here that manages all the senior centers in South County. Um, I also have had the CEO, the executive director on, and I'm going to bring him back on to talk about this because that's a population that I have not heard a lot of discussion about in the
Mhm.
last couple of weeks, unless you are in the community. I have not seen a lot of conversation on a national level regarding seniors, other than they are a vulnerable population
That's
for
right.
coronavirus. But the life impact, the health impact, I have not heard of that. So I'm sorry, I'm really saddened to hear that, but it's totally, I'm sure, not a unique case. I'm sure it's spread all over the country.
Exactly right. So, 10,000 senior centers are facing this crisis from a senior's perspective. And then what you said about vulnerable population, I think, is critical. So we didn't discuss this the last time, but I have an autistic son who's 30 years of age. He lives in North San Diego County. Luckily, in the group that he's in, there's probably a couple of hundred people living in group homes.
Mm-hmm.
None of them have got coronavirus, luckily so far, but they are hunkered down more than you and I. And they're completely confused. They don't understand why. And what they most fear is somebody gets it, not just because they can infect others, but because if they go off to hospital, they will not understand. No one can advocate for them. No one can go with them and hold their hand and say, this person sees the world in a different way. So you're right, that isn't really in the news right now. And yet it's a massive fear, for quite a big population of people. The
So
autism
let me let,
population.
let, let me let's just get a little philosophical for a minute, if you don't mind. I know you don't mind, so I'm I'm going to bring it. Okay. When this thing first started, I will admit I was very skeptical. I was skeptical not because it wasn't in my mind a serious medical condition, not that it somehow outpaced other things like H1N1 or losses from, Spanish flu or any of that stuff that we've had. And anybody who's interested really to look at the number side of it, and I tend to be philosophical, but I also tend to be pragmatic enough to look at numbers. You go to Wikipedia and look at endemics and see what the numbers are. It'll give you it all the way back to like 1700s or something.
That's right.
It's kind of fascinating that we even have that data, to be honest.
Yeah.
But there were crises where we lost 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people globally.
That's right.
And so I was a little skeptical. I was skeptical in that, was this another case of fear really motivating and pushing how we are dealing with this? Granted, we were in the United States, and I think mostly all over the world, sort of caught behind the 8 ball in terms of not really putting into place preventive measures or getting ahead of it. Granted, okay, but the chaotic nature of things, the absoluteness of do's and don'ts and shutdowns, and people were not given a chance to adapt a little bit and feel like they were part of what decisions were being made. It was just very top down. And in that, I think it probably, I don't know if you agree with me, I thought it even caused more fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, that started to feed on itself. I loved when I heard that, people tried to return the 114 rolls they bought per 14 days to Costco, and Costco wouldn't take it back.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going, what happened? I was afraid, so I bought all the toilet paper, and then now I'm okay, kind of. So now I bring it back, but then I didn't understand, why would Costco, that takes everything back, not take out toilet? I mean, was it an unpack?
It was punishment for being a hoarder, I think, Brad.
No, I said yes, Costco, but it didn't make no sense. Your policy basically is take anything back, and now you're not taking back toilet paper.
Yeah.
So do you agree that sort of that fear that maybe was not necessarily baseless, but was exaggerated, was sort of fed on itself there?
Yeah, I do. And I think in a catastrophic event, and we know this from history, as you alluded to, that when something is highly catastrophic and, we see a population of people, going the whole way, which is dying ultimately. And we saw this happening in China early on. And then we start to realize that it's got the potential to spread. I think this is a very classic traveling through Maslow's hierarchy. We're all looking up and thinking, how can we self-actualize in our lives, particularly in places like the US, where we have a very high quality of living. But all of a sudden, we're dragged right back into, the basic needs.
Basic needs.
Yeah, food and water.
Shelter, food, water.
Shelter, exactly. And I think when we're in that shock, I think anxiety and fear drives out a lot of rational thinking. And I think we have to slowly build ourselves up or pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, because it's very easy to catastrophize. And we've seen a fair bit of that. In fact, if you look even at the New York Times, I mean, a fairly sort of sensible body putting out charts and maps and the rest of it, there's a degree to which that's tracking lots of fearful, metrics that predict how bad this can become before it gets better.
The thing I worry about is always, and not necessarily to this case, is there is such a thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like you continue down a certain path and you don't question it, and you find yourself where you're generating your own reality, right? I mean, there's a saying by Peter Drucker, and I'm probably going to mess it up a little bit, so I apologize to Peter, God rest his soul, but where it says to predict the future, you create it, right? Yes. So if you take that and you apply it in a negative manner, how you create a miserable future is by basically continuing to feed yourself the same stuff, and within a bubble, and then have everybody around you. And that's an aspect of social media that I think is negative. Now, that being said, I did see a very positive aspect of social media. And I had a lady on earlier this week where they basically got together 50 seamstresses and basically are generating about 300 to 500 masks a day that are going to caregivers. So like we're experiencing an interesting duality of things. And I think to you and I that are basically students of human nature, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on right now with human dynamics and group thinking and sort of that that feed on itself cycle. And ironically, it's happening in a virtual environment.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
Great.
think we've ever in history had this sort of mass mob or mass herd mentality that's taken place over a crisis of this nature and magnitude on a global scale in a
That's right.
virtual environment. It required people to be within proximity of one another before. Not
That's right.
anymore.
Yeah, and that's a two-sided coin, right? We've got the technology to have almost instantaneous news, and that helps us to communicate one another. But it
Yeah.
also means we're paying attention to the reactive nature of people's responses to all of this. Another excellent book that was written not because of this crisis and was published a couple of months before it happened. Chip and Dan Heath write excellent books, and the latest one is called Upstream. And really, it's a manifesto that says we as humans are very naturally will fall back to very reactive things if we're left to our own devices to do so, when what we should really be doing is engaging in preventive thinking. Building a contextual framework that says, wait a minute, I can't just do all the things that are right in front of me. How do I plan for tomorrow, next month, next year, 10 years time? And that's probably the journey ahead of us now. We have to be thinking. So as much as I applaud, as you say, the people making masks and doing so creatively and the rest of it, those are micro responses to reactive things because we need masks for the next few weeks. But what about stockpiling? What about the next pandemic? What about what we're doing in the hospital response system? How many ICU beds might we need? Those debates haven't happened for 50 years in the healthcare system in the US. And we've, eventually got to start thinking about those things as much, if not more.
Well, I think once this immediacy reaction is over, which that's another fascinating thing about this. The rate of response and immediacy and reaction has been, for me, very pleasantly astounding, to be honest with you. I mean, for things to ramp up the way they did, for people to take initiative. There's a part of me that is disheartened because of the chaotic kind of mass hysteria side of it. Yeah. But there's a part of me that's really encouraged on a human level that people can actually, like, it's like, wow, there's a whole bunch of like creative, entrepreneurial spirited people that just jumped and raced to the occasion. And it was within 48 hours to 72 hours. I mean, it's like, bravo, really, right? And if there is a silver lining to this, is that, and I talked to Jay Barbuda, who's the director of the Center for Leadership at Cal State Fullerton. He was my first interview this last week. We talked about this. We talked about the people that rise to the occasion, and that sometimes it's not the people that you think that show the leadership, and that leadership requires humility. And it's like we're being tested on a lot of these things right now. And it's going to be interesting who basically comes out of this in what capacity. It may not be the people you think. It may be not in ways that you think, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's, for me, Carol Dweck's mindset model is super powerful in current times as well, psychologically, because yes, there's some leadership and there's people clearly in leadership positions and they've done it before and they're using those skill sets in the current environment. But as you say, there are surprising individuals. So I think a better way of thinking about this is who's sitting at home with a fixed mindset, kind of woe is me, this is terrible, I'm going to face all sorts of change that's unwanted in my life. And in fact, I'm effectively paralyzed sitting at home. Even though they've got a ton of time in their hands and time to think, they're actually spending it worrying and with high anxiety.
Self-paralyzed.
Right, self-paralyzed, right. So their whole sort of, philosophy is, I'm paralyzing myself until this is over and someone will fix this for me. As opposed to having a growth mindset, which says, well, wait a minute, this whole journey has got opportunity in the mix. Yes, there's threat, but with every threat comes an opportunity, maybe more than one. So let's look at this in a balanced fashion, and growth mindset starts to allow me to do that. And I think that's the big thing. If people can understand what's underneath a growth mindset, so I can adjust, the way I look at the world. I think going back to people like Albert Bandura, we've got then self-efficacy. We've got human agency that allows individuals to say, I'm going to take responsibility for me. And in so doing, I'm going to be a role model for growth mindset for others. And that's going to create a positive momentum in terms of how we go forward.
That's very, very, very well stated. And I think if you're smart, I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit off the air before we started, but excuse me, the thing about that people that have been kind of running lean, people that have that in their daily exercise, maybe not daily, but maybe weekly reality, is that they do this sort of growth mindset.
Yeah,
And part of it is out of necessity, because if you are in that, needing to feed the pipeline, the funnel all the time, you're kind of constantly, you cannot, you don't have the luxury to rest on your laurels. You don't
yeah,
have the luxury to basically not be agile and nimble.
that's
And
right.
so I think that is in a way being tested for those who think that they're in that mindset, to see if they really are in that mindset.
Hmm.
Um, I have seen it across different industries. I know people, I mean, like you, we tend to be like all over, we're non-linear kind of people. We know people across industries. And it's interesting to see people that are in the same industry and how they have responded in the last week, and where you can see you can project one where it's going to grow at least incrementally smaller than it was, but it's going to still grow. It's going to still be moving at 20, 30 miles an hour versus coming to a complete stop. And then they can ramp up as things change. And somebody else in the same industry where that paralysis, that sense of, I just need to go get that stimulus money. I need to go get that, $1,200 a month to check. And if I don't get that, we're done. And what you think, what's the word? Like, it, uh, if you think it, you manifest it, kind of thing.
Sure.
It's really interesting. You actually, one of the things that you posted on, and actually one of the main reasons why I reached out to you is you put something on LinkedIn that I thought was interesting. And we joked a little bit about the color contrast situation there, but and I'll share it, because I think you were so focused on getting the sort of the pros and cons out, that you kind of use colors that would almost be in the negative connotation. But would you take a minute, John, and just go through? Look, from an aesthetic perspective, I caught it, and it was like kind of just funny. But it made me
Sure.
look, which if it made me look, then it did what
Yeah,
it's supposed to do, right?
that's
Would
right.
you
There's
go? Would you
psychology
go
and
through?
everything.
Yeah, would you go through that? Would you go through that for us?
Sure, sure. And as I'm often doing on LinkedIn, I'm trying to stimulate debate because I'm so in love with contextual thinking, trying to get people to think about the bigger picture. So I think that post was really just, it was 10 points, and I didn't want to go out there and either catastrophize or be overly optimistic or idealistic in terms of what could be. So I ended up saying, look, there are consequences for COVID-19 during and after it, and some of them we can guess, but here's my sort of my starter thoughts. And my first five were relatively negative and talked about job loss and access to capital drying up, and supply chain creating problems, in the stores and in everything else, and people having to cancel, travel and vacations, etc. And then particularly ending up with, more isolation and loneliness, even with technology to help us. But as I said earlier, for every threat, there's an opportunity. So I ended, and I did put it in red, which is kind of, traffic light stop. I
Mm-hmm.
said, but wait a minute, we're going to be in an environment in which, interest rates and borrowing rates will probably drop like a stone. I mean, they've effectively dropped to zero since I wrote
Yeah.
that. Will there be a lot of technology innovation? We're seeing an absolute explosion in terms of healthcare technology innovation going on right now, and it's been spun up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's just incredible. The online education stuff, people educating their kids at school, and the innovation that I've been hearing about has just been stunning. I
Mm-hmm.
think we will ultimately be talking about disease prevention and future pandemics, and I think that's only a good thing. And how do we get more preventive and wellness centered? And ultimately, what I'm most excited about in terms of the opportunity, and why I ended on point 10, is what's the cultural shift going to be? And it's hard for me not to see massive potential opportunity for society to become kinder and more collegiate and more helpful and more sharing. So I think that's what excites me the most. And it stimulated, 35 comments even on LinkedIn. And there's some very intelligent voices out there that are adding to the mix. And I think that's a great debate to be having.
Yeah, it's also been interesting. Like, yeah, the dynamic. You and I have been on social media and are very active for a while, and it's interesting to see that interaction. I mean, especially on LinkedIn. Part of it is we just have, we're not going anywhere and we have time on our hands. So you could look at that as a negative because, oh my God, we're just basically spinning our wheels doing nothing. I look at it as being, and maybe it's from an entrepreneurial kind of a marketing mindset, that makes for a captive audience.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, to all people that are basically posting all kinds of stuff, you are now in a situation where people are more aware, they're paying more attention, because you can only binge on Netflix so much. You
Yeah,
can only watch so much YouTube, right? And cats basically pointing fingers at women on the other side of the screen. It's
sure.
like, right, people are paying attention, and so it is actually an opportunity to craft your message in such a way that you may be able to differentiate yourself as a voice out there. You may
Sure.
be able to be of service, which is really, this is another thing right now. It's not about, how many clients I signed this month. The measure of value and purpose now is, did I actually put out something that helped somebody navigate their day,
I agree.
that provided a connection with a resource that they needed desperately. It's like sort of that pay it forward on steroids right now with
Yeah,
the
it
aid of
really is.
social media.
Yeah. In fact, did I leave the world a better place than I found it, which goes all the way back to Baden-Powell, I think. So, I think that's the legacy stuff. It's altruism. And in the end, I think that's what human purpose is all about, making the world a better place,
Well, it's a
whatever that
hopeful message. It's a hopeful message. I
is.
mean, what you're
Hopeful.
putting out there is a hopeful message. Now, I'll put on my jaded hat for a minute, right? And because I can't help myself. But I agree with you. I think there is definitely going to be a societal change. There's going to be an impact. The lasting and sustainability of that is where I'm hopeful, but I call myself a realistic optimist, and I actually used to say that there is actually a difference between a realistic optimist and an optimistic realist. That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a realistic optimist, but I will say that I hope that this takes, because we are being shown an opportunity. We have an opportunity here to be shown
Yeah.
how quality of life can be crafted differently. That it's
I
not
agree.
about the attainment of immaterial things. Like don't get me wrong. I think there's going to be beautiful connections and reconnections and reignition of relationships that may have been basically on hold and strained. There's also going to be a whole bunch of divorces that come out of this.
Sure.
Yeah. But as a student of human nature like you, I think the ultimate positive that could come out of this is that kinder, gentler thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Agreed.
it's definitely, yeah, it's an opportunity for us to, I think, look in the mirror, and it's a scary thing, but we
Yeah.
got all the time in the world right now.
Well,
But
exactly. We've got time in our hands at home. And it's why I think this whole growth mindset thing, and we don't have to anchor it wholly to what Albert was doing with kids, but I think as humans, if we can understand that as a rubric and what we have to do, I think we've all got the chance to be more growth mindset orientated. Not in a perfect way. Some of us are wired a little bit more in that way than others. But I think we can all learn what is the heuristic that we need to go and take us forward. And I think that's what drives the kind of society. I put a post up on LinkedIn yesterday about developing a happiness index.
mm,
It's not just about doing a survey, which Gallup does, which says, do you feel happy on a scale of 0 to 10? I think we can put more sophistication behind that. Those are the sorts of things I think take a village to really craft well, start tracking, and then acting on. This is a great opportunity to have those philosophical thoughts, I think, while we're doing what we're doing, and maybe we're doing for the next few weeks sitting at home.
I know we've got a couple of minutes. I know you have another appointment coming up, but which seems kind of like a strange thing to say when you're sitting in your guest bedroom.
I know. It's a series of phone calls and Zoom webinars right now.
uh, take a couple of minutes and maybe share something that is of interest right now, like that you're focusing on, or something that you're worried about.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely do that. So, Rad, that I work in the healthcare investment community, and a lot of that is early stage investment, and it's the investments that dry up the quickest.
Yeah.
And I'm worried about this because we've seen a very quick abandonment of the space, at least temporarily. What that means in practice is what investors have done, particularly institutional investors, but angels are the same, is they've said, I'm so uncertain right now about what the world will look like. I cannot make a decision to go and deploy my money. Maybe I will need it for myself. So it's a very rational response.
Yep.
Of course, the problem is this is the lifeline for many early stage companies, some of which are innovating in ways that will help society through this very crisis and then beyond. So we've got the ultimate in terms of, a paradox. in terms of what's going on. So what I'm thinking most about is how do we create enough growth mindset in the investment community for them not to go and turn off the tap for too long and start to go and sort of pick those technologies that are going to be helpful in the longer term and not just freeze. So that's what I'm working on the most right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that is something that could easily become the sort of the unsung, the unspoken of victim of this, and like to get that, the irony of this, and I've said it to you earlier. Last year was trotting along, but it was a little sluggish, and I think there was that concern about an incoming recession and an election year and all this stuff that was playing out. And there was a little bit of a wait and see and sit back kind of thing. But then this year, and I cannot explain it exactly other than, hey, let's get it done while we still have the current administration. I can't really explain what it is, but this year started off with a bang. I mean,
Yeah,
people were like hit the ground like, oh my God, 1,000 miles a minute, like
that's
compared
right.
to
That's what
December.
makes it so shocking because of that. I think we were barreling along fast, and then all of a sudden, wham, we have this situation.
Yeah, we hit a wall. Yeah, and so with that being said, would you take a minute and also tell people how to follow you, give some, if there's a website. I know you're on LinkedIn too, and I encourage everybody to basically follow Jon because, like he says, we need thought-provoking, think outside the box, challenging norms. It's healthy to do that, whether you embrace what it is being discussed or not. I think having people that are willing to, not for shock value, but just for, why not? Let's have this conversation. Let's delve into that. Let's go down that rabbit hole for a little bit. We don't lose our personality or our positions or our values by doing that. And if anything, we basically open and expand our minds doing it and potentially helping ourselves and others. So would you basically take a minute and just share how people can get hold of you?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. LinkedIn, as you said, is a really good way. I'm Jon Warner on LinkedIn, just Jon. There's no H in my name, and you can find me pretty easily. I'm on a lot of other social media platforms. I'm on Twitter as well, Jon C. Warner. I'm in that environment. But from a website perspective, because I'm involved with entrepreneurship, the slamprocess.com website, which is dedicated to the last book that I wrote, is probably the best way of getting in touch with me. And there's actually a contact form there as well. Like you, I'm very happy to talk to anyone who's a free-thinking individual.
Yeah, the art of conversation has saved humanity many a times.
Indeed.
When we stop talking is when we really get in trouble.
I agree,
So,
and podcasters are the new vehicle for that to happen well. People like you.
I did laugh, Jon. I have to tell you, I did laugh when we were shutting down everything, and they released a list of essential services. And I looked down, and right under laundromats was newspapers, TV, radio, podcast.
There you go.
Let me tell you, I had
up the list.
I had a blast telling my whole family. I told you I was an essential service.
There you go. Perfect. Very good.
Thank you, Jon. I appreciate your time, my friend. You stay safe, and I'll check in with you again. I have a feeling we'll be talking again before this is all over.
Sounds good. All right, Rod. Very good. See you soon.
You too.
Bye.